back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
Hey, we're back. It's America's Workforce. Don't forget we're available on various platforms. That includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify. And when you get a chance, just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and eventually give us a rating. 5 stars would be greatly appreciated. We'd be very thankful for that. Let's go to line number 1. Welcome one of our regulars, also a proud sponsor. We're talking about the heat and frost insulators. Insulators.org is the general website. Pete Ielmini heads the LMCT. And how appropriate. He figures, since tomorrow is Thanksgiving, let's talk about what we are thankful for. And we certainly are thankful for the unions and what the unions have accomplished over so many years. Pete, welcome back to the show. How's my Jersey guy doing today?
Hey, how you doing today?
I'm good. Are you all set for the holidays? What's the story?
Oh, we're getting ready. We're cooking for the celebration tomorrow. Where our family gathering, like most people, is going to be a lot smaller than what we're used to. But we're going to have a beautiful dinner with my immediate family, and looking forward to a scaled-back Thanksgiving. But the intentions and the love is not going to be any different, though.
There you go. Well, this is a time of year that we all sit back and think about what we are thankful for, and I'm glad what you've done. What you brought to the table today is what we are thankful for with regard to what unions have done over so many years. And I'm reading, I guess you look back 150 years. Pete, talk to me about what you come up with here.
Well, in fact, on the heels of last month's broadcast, we talked about the importance of the ability to vote and why people should vote. And it just made me think for the last month, here are the reasons why. And when I look back and be reflective over the last 150 years of union labor, there's a lot to be thankful for. And especially even if you're not part of a union, the labor movement in this country for the last 150 years has benefited everybody, whether you're part of a union or not. And a lot of laws have been passed and a lot of workplace standards have been established that benefits everybody. And 2020 has been a tough year in so many levels and so many ways. And it's never going to be forgotten. But, maybe we can talk about some of the things that we should be thankful for and some of the brighter things that we can look forward to by using the accomplishments of the labor movement over the last 150 years.
And let's talk about how so many of our past union brothers and sisters fought and died for those accomplishments. I mean, things were, if you go back into history, you will see the blood, sweat, and tears that occurred when immigrants came over from various countries, got into factories. There were no safety standards. There were long hours, kids working. I mean, we could go on and on and on. Let's talk. Let's go back to that time, Pete, and reflect on how bad things were and why people said enough is enough. We have to band together and make things better for ourselves and our families. Go ahead.
Yeah, and you're exactly correct. And this is one of the things that our school systems do not spend enough time discussing in our teaching our young children. We talk about the industrialized revolution that happened between 1900 and 1930, and the rise of the industry and manufacturing, but worker protection was never really seemed to be covered that much, although it was very important. Especially in that era, workers were exploited, pay was low, conditions were horrific, and if it wasn't for the banding of workers coming together and having a single voice, these accomplishments would not have been had. And the fact that unions were formed on some very basic principles to increase the quality of life for every worker. And it 150 years later, 100 years later, 50 years later, it has become a very complex political machine. But the backbone of it is still in existence today, of improving the lives of workers, and whether that be financial, where you're able to make enough money to be able to live in the greatest country in the world, or come home every night with your life and your health and all your limbs intact, is extremely important. And when people started to work in construction and factories, that wasn't the case. The fact of a construction worker rarely worked past the age of 35 or 40 because his body was shot. It was no longer employable or usable for the employer, and it was a young man's game. And it was deaths were incredible. When large buildings were built, there was an estimate of the amount of deaths that happened on the job. There was one major structure in New York City that was built in the 1920s. 7 people were killed on that project, and they had a big celebration, that the job was considered to be safe because they anticipated 25 people would have died on that project. So at the time, only 7 died. That was a major safety accomplishment. I mean, it sounds barbaric, but that's the way things were before the strength of unions really came into play.
Yeah, you know, what comes to mind is the Triangle Shirtwaist fire, which goes back to, what was it, like 1911, 1912. And because of that legislation, it took years. It didn't happen overnight. I mean, you had a lot of people that banded together, and there were literally hundreds of young women, many of them immigrants, that died. They jumped to their deaths because of the fight. They couldn't get out. The doors were locked, and they locked the doors because they didn't want them to go to the bathroom. I mean, that's how crazy things were. And Pete, maybe you could speak to this. Fast forward to today, that same kind of scenario. Where is that? That's in like a Bangladesh, India. And isn't that primarily why companies have located in those various countries? Because they don't have the standards that we have here in the United States?
That's absolutely correct. We have child labor laws that go into effect, and just plain working conditions. And companies and corporate greed tries to reduce the cost of manufacturing and going to third world countries or out of this country. And so a widget can be produced at a cheaper amount than it can be produced here in the United States. And that's why it's so important that consumers support the companies and buy products that their employees are being paid a proper wage for. And it is a worldwide problem. And we talk about another subject we can talk a whole nother session on, is globalization, on how we live in a smaller world. 100 years ago, we were forced to be able to use the manufacturers in the vicinity, in our country, in a region, in the state, because the transportation was not as advanced as it is today. But now, commerce, you can pick that phone up, pick up that computer, and you can talk to people in Bangladesh as quickly as you can do across town. And manufacturing can be produced, and factories can be produced, and workers go to the cheapest labor. And it's the labor movement has transformed, not just within the United States and Canada, but it has transformed to efforts that are done worldwide.
Pete, let me ask you, has COVID-19, the pandemic, cast a different light on unions? We've seen more organizing. We've seen non-union workers, grocery stores. I could go on. And I've asked this question to a number of union leaders like yourself. And I'm just hopeful. I think you're seeing a lot of frustration out there organizing. I mean, I'm hearing that they're like Amazon, for one. They're organizing in various parts of the country where where they have right-to-work laws because they have to organize. They know the benefits of a union. I'm just wondering, especially now, with a pro-union presidential team, Joe Biden is not shy about talking good about unions. Just wondering, moving forward here, what do you feel?
Well, especially as this past year we've had the COVID epidemic, and there's not going to be any more organizations that are going to protect workers more than the unions. And,
right.
And thank God we have the unions to be able to advise the workers on how to properly protect themselves. And we, as the insulators and also part of the building trades and part of the AFL-CIO, we spent a lot of time and effort getting the word out to our members, to our workers, on how to properly protect themselves realistically, without hearing all the hype and all the drama that you get off the social media. We feel very proud of the fact that we were able to streamline the proper PPE that had to be used, the proper procedures, educate our workers on the facts that we knew it at the time. As science changed a little bit, we were right with the science, with them relaying the information out to our members. I also believe that also benefited even people that are not part of a union. It also benefit them as well. Mm-hmm. With the Biden administration taking over in office in 2020, we feel very fortunate and looking forward to the excitement that we're going to have a labor-friendly president. Hopefully we'll have a labor-friendly Congress as well, so we can continue the labor movement moving forward to help protect our workers. And again, it goes back to the same principles, to be able to give the conditions so workers can be safe and also be able to earn enough money to be able to afford to live in the greatest country in the world.
There you go. Pete Ielmini of the Heat and Frost Insulators, insulators.org for more information. Great apprenticeship programs, too, I might add. Linda Cosimo is going to be joining us later in the show on behalf of the Musicians Union, Local 4, talking about the struggle for many musicians, especially during the holiday season. I mean, it's tough during a pandemic, and the future is not too bright, at least not for this season. We'll see what lies ahead in the new year. It's all part of America's Workforce. Back in a few minutes.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens. Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And we're back. It's America's Workforce. Don't forget, you can check us out on Facebook at AWF Union Podcast. Let's go back to our live line. Rejoin Pete Ielmini, one of our regulars, on behalf of the Heat and Frost Insulators, Heat and Frost Insulators LMCT. Insulators.org is the general website. Pete decided, since tomorrow's Thanksgiving, he wants to run down the accomplishments of labor over the last 150 years, and he narrowed it down to 15 accomplishments. We all know there's a whole lot more, but let's zero on the 15 most important ones here. Pete, I'm going to let you take it away here. The 15, let's talk about them. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to be able to talk about the list, and I came up with 15 of them. And when our segment is over, if people want to argue why wasn't this put in there, or that shouldn't be in there, great. I'd love to be able to have that conversation. But
okay,
here we go. The most 15 accomplishments of the labor movement that benefit all Americans, and also I'd like to add Canadians as well as our good friends of the North, the past 150 years, and no particular order. I didn't rate these. I just picked the top 15. And keep in mind, all of these have benefited everybody as a worker, not just the unions. There's a myth that the benefits of unions are only directly for the sole benefit of the members. And while that is obviously true in many cases, you have to be realistic. And a lot of these pressures of the labor movement were able to generate laws in this country that benefited everybody. For example, number 15, the 8-hour workday, the 40-hour work week, weekends, vacation pay, all stemmed from the development of the labor movement. On the 8-hour workday, it was devised that 1/3 of the day is for work, 1/3 of the day is for rest, and the other 1/3 is for recreation. Let's all be thankful the labor movement pushed Congress to pass the Fair Labor Standards of 1938. Number 14, company-paid pension and other retirement benefits. Federal laws and guidelines for employers to manage retirement funds that even includes today the 401k that many people have. Pensions are fewer and fewer. Pensions are still very well in the labor organizations, but they're fewer outside of labor. But 401ks are very common. Let's all be thankful the labor movement pushed Congress to pass the Employer Retirement Income Security Act, better known as ERISA, of 1974. Number 13, child labor and unfair work practices were identified and eliminated. Federal, state enforced mandate workers to be of certain ages and develop proper working conditions for all. Let's all be thankful the labor movement pushed Congress to pass the Fair Labor Standards of 1938. Number 12, health care insurance from employers. Very complicated topic and one that has been wrestled with for the last 100 years. Let's be thankful that the labor movement has pushed Congress to pass the Employer-Based Health Care Act, Patient Protection Act, and the Affordable Care Act, even being developed as recently as 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Employer to pay, number 11, employer to pay for time off for legitimate medical reason and child birthing issues. Extremely important, and anyone has ever known that when they want to raise a family and they're having children, or someone is seriously sick in their family, these are major issues. Let's all be thankful that the labor movement pushed Congress to develop federal laws to protect workers from losing their jobs or pay for medical reasons with the Family Medical Leave Act of 1993. Number 10, of the most common 15 accomplishments of the labor movement that benefit all Americans in the last 150 years. The government to develop paid retirement benefits by paying into a Social Security benefit program, a mandated 401k, if you will, or annuity for all. Let's all be thankful the labor movement pushed Congress to pass the Social Security Act of 1935, something that we still have to fight for today to be able to keep. Number 9, this is important. Fighting for equal rights for all workers is part of the labor movement, and fighting for human rights have many common interests. A federal law that does not permit discrimination based on race, age, religion, and gender. Let's all be thankful that the labor and civil rights movement pushed Congress to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Number 8, safety in the workplace became one of the biggest successful stories of the labor movement by forcing the employer to act and provide a safe workplace. Millions of lives have been saved, and even more have a safe work environment today. Everybody benefits, and all should be thankful for the labor movement to push Congress to pass the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970, which ended up forming OSHA the Occupational Safety and Health Administration in 1972. The ability for people to form and join a union. Worker voices can be heard without reprisal or being fired or disciplined. The strength of the union labor movement are from the men and women who actually are in the workplace every day. Their voices, their opinions must be heard and acted on. Even non-union workers have benefited from the rise of workers' rights. Let's all be thankful that the labor movement pushed Congress to pass the Wagner Act of 1935, which also developed the National Labor Relations Act of 1935. Labor leaders, number 6, labor leadership was successful to form such organizations as the AFL-CIO, the North American Building Trade Union, NAPTU, and many other nationally recognized union leadership organizations. The mere presence of such organizations affect the entire workforce of our two great countries. Let's all be thankful the labor movement pushed these organizations to have a major impact in every aspect of work and politics. Number 5 of the 15 most important labor accomplishments that benefit all Americans. Unemployment benefits. When a worker is laid off or terminated without fault of the worker. A federal mandate for state-funded programs that help workers and their families in tough times. Let's all be thankful for the labor movement pushed Congress to pass the Unemployment Insurance Act of 1939, which was changed several times during the Great Depression. It wasn't funded enough to be able to handle the unemployment of the Great Depression, and it was modified several times. The last one was in 1939. And most recently, the CARES Act of 2020. And that's the benefit that has helped so many of us Americans have additional unemployment benefits because of the dreaded COVID virus. Number 4, a forgotten history gem and a jewel that has been forgotten about of worker rights and civil rights. The ability for public workers to organize and form unions gave the power to public workers to form such unions as ASME and other public unions. This was the cornerstone of why Martin Luther King was in Memphis, unfortunately, when he was assassinated. Martin Luther King is taught in our schools as a celebrated American hero and a leader, and it's taught he was a great man. It was taught that he was assassinated, unfortunately, in Memphis. But it's not really emphasized why he was in Memphis. He was in Memphis because he was helping the sanitation workers form a union and settle a strike. That's why he was there.
That's right.
Let's all be thankful that the labor movement pushed President Kennedy to pass an executive order in 1962 that allowed public employees to form unions. Number 3, when a worker has to work more than the standard hours to receive extra pay called overtime, time spent away from personal time and working holidays has forced employers to accept working conditions of overtime. Let's all be thankful the labor movement has pushed an employer standard of overtime that benefits by all. Number 2, the training of construction workers with a time-honored tradition called apprenticeship. Apprenticeship has grown to the highest levels by having federal guidelines ensuring the legitimate, proper apprenticeships are registered. There are many training programs that claim that they are apprenticeships, but the federal government oversees and indentures proper training through insurance that the training is properly done into the high standards that it warrants. Let's all be thankful the labor movement pushed Congress to pass the Fitzgerald Act of 1935, which ensures quality apprenticeship program. And the last one, number one, of the most 15 accomplishments of the labor movement that benefit all workers in the past 150 years. Let's all be thankful for the people who work and live in the two greatest countries in the world, the United States and Canada, for the working class is the backbone of the structure of these countries. And that is the list of the 15 most accomplishments that the labor movement have been able to provide to everybody in our two great countries. Let's be thankful and reflective for what we have in this holiday season. Yes, things can be better. They can always be better. But at the same token, things can always be a lot worse than they are. So with that, I'd like to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving.
And same to you, my friend, on behalf of all the people that make up America's Workforce, BMA Media, and the group that brings forth this show Monday through Friday, and all the guests like yourself. So we are thankful for people like you, Pete. You take care, be safe. Best of Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you right around Christmas time, okay?
All right. Thank you, Flash. Happy Thanksgiving.
You got it. Pete Ielmini, Heat and Frost Insulators, insulators.org, and Mechanical Insulators, LMCT.com.